Do you know how this strange move, en passant, began in a chess game? Well, you see, once upon a time, in the game of chess, pawns moved only one square at a time straight forward. And you see, what happened is it was very slow. People took their time. And as you can see on my chessboard here, that meant that pieces would advance like this, one move at a time, slowly across the board. And what happened is players went, this is really slow. Let's speed this up. So instead, they came up with a new rule and it caught on. And the rule was that every pawn on its first turn has the choice of jumping 2 squares or 1. And after its first move, then it can only move 1 more square. So here it can move only 1, it cannot jump 2 again. And so what happened, they ran into trouble. You see, what occurred is players would play moves like this, here, and then jump. And then we would move here, let's say, and the pawn advances. And then they could just block the position. You see how these pawns advance like this and here. And if this pawn pushes past, this pawn would jump 2 squares. And so they would end up with positions that looked completely stuck because these pawns could jump past each other and they would not have the chance to capture. Hence, the move en passant was found. They went, what can we do about that problem? So how about this? When a pawn does jump 2 squares, such as this position, and land beside another pawn, it never gave that pawn a chance to capture it. So let's make up this rule where you can do en passant, in passing. And on the very next turn, after a pawn has jumped 2 squares, landing beside another pawn, the pawn here in the middle can now capture the pawn that has jumped 2 squares. And you can literally play a move as if the pawn had moved 1 square forward. You can play pawn behind it, capturing the pawn that jumped 2 squares. And that took care of the problem of pawns getting stuck. So let's look at a couple practical examples of how en passant is used in chess games. So here we are. We're going to go to this position. See this? And I heard about this story once when I was young and a teenager, and it was incredible what happened. There was a position very similar to this. And if you count the pieces, you'll see that the light pieces have a knight and a rook and 3 pawns right now versus a rook and 2 pawns. So you can easily see that the light pieces have much more power. And in fact, they're close to trapping this king and checkmating. So the dark pieces came up with a plan. Let's just keep checking this king. And the rook moved down, checking this king, and the king ran up to escape the checks. And the rook just kept on checking. And we got to this position, and the light king went, ooh, I can hide behind this pawn. This way, if this rook moves forward, there will be no more checks, and then I can turn around and continue my attack on this dark king. The dark pieces looked closely and went, wait, that king cannot move anywhere. And excited, found this move, jumping the pawn 2 squares forward, checking the king, protected by their own pawn. The king has nowhere to go. The dark pieces went, checkmate, I win this game. And the light player looked at it carefully and went, wait a sec. En passant, I will take your pawn. And not only do I take it, eliminating the check, your king is now in checkmate. Because the knight covers this square, the rook covers the rest, it is checkmate. Now, is it true? Actually, it is. It happened in a tournament where this occurred. This wasn't the exact position, but it was very close to this one. And let's move forward, though, with another practical example. Take a look at, for example here, this position. You see, here the kings are on opposite sides of the board. The dark king is on this side. The light king is over on this side, right? And what is the strategy? The position is kind of closed. So the goal is attack each other's king. The king is the most important target. You definitely want to attack it. The light pieces are going to try to checkmate the king. The dark pieces are going to try to hurry and checkmate this king. The trouble is, can you see how light's pieces are further advanced? And white is got a very powerful attack. So black could play something like b5, but it's probably just not fast enough because this pawn's going to advance up the board and look at how it's going to capture the pawn or open the line to the king. So instead, dark pieces came up with a different choice. Okay, instead of attacking right away, how about we block these pawns? You see, let's try to just block all these pawns. And do you see the move? That's right. If the dark pieces try this, you can simply play pawn behind the other pawn, capturing that pawn that had jumped 2 squares. And in doing so, look at how the lines open up. Even if the bishop moves, let's say to here, now we can push the other pawn. And once again, these files are opening up very quickly to the king. I would bet it's not going to be very many moves before the light pieces checkmate this king, because there's just too many open lines. The rook will come over and join the attack. The bishop and queen are lined up. The knight could jump in. There's just too much pressure on that king. So you see, knowing en passant is really, really important for strategy in chess, not just knowing this fun, cool rule. Now, if you want to practice it, here's a fun thing you can do. If you take all your pieces starting position and play this fun activity, you can even take off the pieces off the back row, play with a friend if you like, and start playing a game. And your game is how many en passant captures can we create together? So for example, the light pieces maybe jump here, and then maybe the dark pieces jump here, and then we advance. And do you see how you can help each other create a en passant already? That's right. The dark pawn could jump here, allowing en passant. There's one. And if the pawn takes back, it could, or since you're creating en passant captures together, this pawn could advance. And now when we jump 2, do you see how the dark pawn could take this pawn off the board? And there we've created 2 en passant captures. Why don't you see how many total, as many as possible, en passant captures you can do creating with a friend? Put it in the comments below. See who can get the most. And remember to like and subscribe for more chess tips with National Master Elliott Neff.